everyone. Welcome to this month's conference call. This is Chris Widener. On behalf of Jim Rohn and Jim Rohn International President Kyle Wilson, I'd like to welcome you to the conference call for Month 3's Pillar, which is all about health. So far, the pillar of successes that we have covered, Month 1 was personal development. Month 2 was goal setting. And so this month we are going to be spending our time with an expert in the area of health. And as you know from the emails that we've looked at and that you've gotten so far from Jim and myself and from Kyle, we've been talking about health. So before we get into meeting our guest and going through some of the discussion that we're going to have today, I want to just give you a basic outline again of the way that Jim has set up the whole idea of health. It's been an exciting month as we've been able to take a look at health, but not just physical health, but health as a holistic way of looking at it. As Jim has mentioned, we are looking at it in a more broad-based way. We are looking at it in regard to human beings being made up in three parts: the body, the soul, and the spirit. The body, of course, as he has defined it, obviously is just the physical shell, the body part of us, that part of us that's physical. The soul is the mind, will, and emotions, the intangible part of us that drives so much of our life. The body is the physical part. The soul is the mind, will, and emotions, and then of course we have the spirit. And the spirit is that part of us, also intangible, but it's the part of us that transcends this world and is able to commune with God. And so we're going to talk on this conference call about each of those areas. We're going to talk about some ways physically that you can be better health conscious in regard to the physical world, regard to your body, in regard to exercise specifically. We're also going to be talking about the physical world as it relates to your body in the area of nutrition. And then we're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about mind, will, and emotions. We're going to talk specifically how those affect your physical body and your exercise and your nutrition. And then we're going to close out with a little bit of discussion on how you can become more healthy spiritually. So with that, I want to welcome our guest today to our conference call. His name is Greg Landry, and Greg is an exercise physiologist. He's been a friend of mine for quite some time now. I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last 5 years or so, and he's an expert in the area of health, specifically in the area of physical health with his exercise physiology practice that he has. He lives in North Carolina, and his website is www.landry.com. And he's a terrific guy. He's here to talk to us a little bit about the physical health, but also we're going to touch a little bit on the emotional, mental, and will aspects, as well as the spiritual. So, Greg, welcome to the conference call. You have people literally from all over the world that are going to be joining us on this, and we're going to take a look at health. So welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
Good. Well, tell us just briefly a little bit about your background. Maybe give us 30 seconds or so on who you are and what it is that you do primarily in your work.
Well, I have a master's degree in exercise physiology, so my focus is exercise, physical health, nutrition. And over the past 10, 12, 13 years, I guess, I've been helping people both in one-on-one situations, group situations, through writings, conference calls, audio tapes, to optimize their exercise program, the way they eat, with the goal being a better quality of life, more energy, sleeping better, feeling better, weight management, and all of that comes through a proper, consistent program of exercise and eating.
Yeah, good. Now, you also have a book, and what is that book about?
It's about exercise and healthy eating with those goals in mind, and primarily for one of my books for weight management.
Okay.
We've got overweight situations are rampant, not only in the U.S. but around the world now because of our eating habits, and the percentage of people that are obese increases every year. So I think it's a problem that many people have to deal with, and exercise, consistent exercise in particular, and healthy eating helps to address that.
Yeah, now I read just somewhere the other day that something like 58% of all U.S. adults are overweight, and then I think it was something like in the 30% of those who would be classified obese. Now, one of the things that is very interesting to me and what we're going to get into here is the whole topic of how it's not just a physical problem, that the fact that we're overweight or we're unhealthy physically is not just a physical problem. And when we get to the area of the whole mental aspects, the willpower, the emotions, we're going to talk a little bit about that, how that affects us. So, well, the people who have joined the Jim Rohn One-Year Success Plan, we're now in month 3. The first month we took an overview of personal development and what it means to get involved in personal development. Then last month, in month 2, we talked about goal setting. This month we're talking specifically about health. So why don't we talk a little bit about physical health, because as people have gotten into it, they're now basically 11 or 12 weeks into the program as they're listening to this, and they might be saying, okay, now it's really time for me. I've honed down into what it is that I want to change, and I really want to change some things about my physical health. So why don't we talk about exercise first, because we're going to talk about exercise, nutrition, then the mental aspects, and then the spiritual aspects. So what are some ideas or some tips or some guidelines, probably would be the best word to use, as it relates to getting started with a physical fitness program? What would you tell somebody who came in and said, I want to get physically fit, and they may be overweight, maybe they're not, maybe they just really want to get physically fit, because not everybody who is thin is physically fit. So maybe they want to start looking at exercise. Maybe they've just joined a club or something like that. What would be maybe your top 4 or 5 tips for getting started and making sure that it works?
Well, Chris, I always tell people I have a great job, because one of the things I get to do is to see the change in people when they go from being sedentary to active. And it's a wonderful change, because it changes everything about a person. It changes them physically. We know from decades of research that when people are active, they are less prone to a lot of the common diseases that plague people and kill people, heart disease, certain cancers, strokes, etc. We're healthier when we're more active. So that's one of the wonderful changes that happen. Secondly, we're more energetic. We sleep better and need less sleep. So it changes through that. It changes people's outlook on life, because if you have more energy, if you're more rested, you have a much more positive outlook on life. You're more productive. You enjoy life more. Also, physiologically, it changes just about all the physiological systems in our body so that everything works better. Metabolism is increased, for example. That's important for a lot of reasons. One is weight management. When our metabolism goes up, it's much easier to control our weight, because we burn more calories 24 hours a day just because metabolism is elevated. Now,
when you say metabolism, we're basically talking about the body's ability to burn calories?
Yeah, I like to think of it as the body's motor. Just like your car has a motor, if it's sitting out in your driveway and it's idling, well, your body has an idle that goes on 24 hours a day. Now, if your car's idle is a little bit higher, it burns more fuel. And the same with your body. Your body's fuel is calories. So if your idle is set a little bit higher, you burn more calories all day long. And that's what metabolism is.
So what you're saying is that not everybody has the same level of metabolism, just even at a standard rate.
That's right, Chris.
Okay. So if we get into exercising, it actually raises our idle, so to speak.
It sure does.
So we're burning calories and our body's working better even when we're not actually on the treadmill or something like that.
That's right.
Oh,
and research tells us that after about age 30, if we're not active people, our muscle gradually atrophies. In other words, it starts to to disappear and become less toned. And as that happens, our metabolism gradually decreases. So if we do nothing about it, beginning early 30s, through the end of our life, our metabolism gradually declines. Now, the good news is that we can reverse that, and our metabolism actually can be higher than it was in our 20s if we're consistent with exercise. So, again, the beautiful thing that I get to see is that people change dramatically, physically, physiologically, mentally, emotionally. Their outlook on life is totally different when they go from being sedentary to being active people. And I believe that our bodies were made to be active. And I believe that because the evidence is there. When we are active, we are much healthier physically, mentally, emotionally. So I think our bodies weren't designed to sit at a desk all day or sit on the couch.
Yeah, our bodies reward themselves by becoming better when we go out and put a little exercise to
Absolutely.
it. So tell us maybe just 15 or 20 seconds about one of your success stories. It's always good to see an example. Obviously, you don't want to use names or anything, but somebody who really changed their lifestyle and experienced those changes in terms of weight loss and maybe renewed vigor for life or something like that. Do you have anything pops off the top of your head?
Sure. Let me give you two on sort of each end of the spectrum. One was a lady that was very overweight, in her 40s, very discouraged. Life had become very difficult for her because she was overweight. Everything was a hassle. Getting out was a hassle. She couldn't fit in clothes. She had no energy. Her life had become very difficult because of her weight loss. And she had made numerous attempts over the years to lose weight and couldn't. So what I told her is, the bottom line is activity. Active people become thinner. There's no way around it. There's a lot of confusion about weight loss, but the very first thing anybody needs to do is to become active. Now, Chris, here's the trap people fall into. It is believing that it has to be a lot quick, or that if they, quote, mess up here and there and skip some days, that they've blown it. Number one, the most important thing anybody can do is to start becoming active daily. Now, it doesn't have to be long. In fact, it can be as simple as a 5 or 10 minute walk around the block at your house. But get a little bit of activity in every day. I don't care if it's just a few minutes. Daily activity is critical to making the physiological changes. So what I told this lady is, and she could start with very little. She started with 3 minutes, just kind of walking down the street by her house. And over a period of time, gradually increased that. And this was very gradual. And she was up to a few blocks after a few weeks. Well, this lady ended up losing over 100 pounds. She ended up walking a marathon less than a year later. So her life changed dramatically just because she started with a very little bit of physical activity and was consistent with it.
Now, you mentioned also, just starting even little things, and I've read a few articles, and we've talked before as well. Just there are simple ways that people could add exercise without even changing their daily routine. Instead of taking the elevator to the third floor, they walk the third floor. Instead of driving around the parking lot for 5 minutes until a spot opens up, in the first stall, they park at the outside edge of the parking lot and walk, into the store, or all the different kinds of ideas like that can just add exercise and make your body a little more vigorous, even just in your daily agenda that you already have without even adding exercise, really.
That's right, Chris. Our human nature is to find the easy way to do physical things. And we naturally look for the closest parking place. And when you think about it, it's really pretty ridiculous. So,
I'll drive for 20 minutes around a parking lot.
That's right.
Just to find the closest one, just waiting.
It's our nature, but you're right.
Yeah.
Small changes can make a big difference, and they can create an active lifestyle.
Yeah.
Now,
you said you had a second example. What was that?
Yeah, quick example. This was a lady in her 50s who was not overweight. She weighed the same as she did back in her 20s. Her clothes fit the same. She didn't look any different. She wasn't overweight. But through 20 years of being sedentary, she had become very lethargic. She had no energy. She didn't sleep well. She had never felt energetic and good. Her outlook on life was not good because of this. So she said, I don't need to lose weight, Greg, but I want to make some changes and feel good and feel healthy.
And that's a very important point, because most of the time when people think of being unhealthy, they think of being overweight. They
right.
think of being fat. And that's just not true, because that may be one of the most dangerous myths. Because people can be, they can have a slim body, but just like you described this woman, they don't have energy, their outlook on life, and those are physically tied into who we are, and that's really important for us to understand. I'm glad you've given us this example.
Absolutely. So, same thing here. We didn't start any differently than the overweight lady. I told this lady the first step is consistent exercise. So, start with a 5-minute walk every day. It can be very short, 5 or 10 minutes, but be consistent. It's very important that it be daily or as close to daily as you can. So she started doing this. Bottom line, 4 months later, she gained 6 pounds, which was muscle. She was because of exercise. And she was a changed woman. She said, the people in my life, Greg, comment on how different my outlook is, how positive I am, how energetic I am. She said, I feel terrific. I sleep great. I get up in the morning and I have energy. She said life is good. And
so that's an amazing tie-in to this whole concept that Jim has laid out in the pillar of success for this month, that they are all tied together.
Absolutely.
And that's a great example. Just briefly, I know that you've done a lot with weightlifting, and you mentioned that she gained some weight. I don't know if she was weightlifting or not, but one of the things that a lot of people suggest, especially to build the metabolism and get it firing more quickly, and just to stop the muscle atrophy and that type of thing, is weightlifting. Can you give us a couple thoughts on that for some people who might just be thinking about that or thinking about getting started?
Sure, Chris. There are two important components to a successful exercise program. One is aerobic exercise, such as walking, for example. The other is anaerobic exercise, and that's typically weight training. Okay. And we need this to specifically tone the muscles because, again, after age 30, without use, our muscles begin to atrophy, get weaker, the tone decreases, etc. Weight training can target those specific muscles, tone them, which gives you muscle tone, which looks good, feels good, and also increases your metabolism. Now, the misconception, Chris, is that this has to be a big, long, elaborate program, that it has to be at a gym, etc.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, but for people who want to make it very simple, very inexpensive, very quick, it can be done at home with inexpensive hand weights, dumbbells, within 15 or 20 minutes, and it only needs to be done 3 days per week. So it doesn't need to take time or money, yet the benefits, muscle tone, increased metabolism, increased strength. If you're stronger, your day requires a lower percentage of your total energy output, so you don't get as fatigued through the day. So
and there
are a lot of advantages.
Yeah, and they could do push-ups, sit-ups. You really wouldn't even need to have. I mean, I guess the classic example of that was Herschel Walker, the professional football player, who I imagine he probably started lifting weights once he got into the NFL, but as of up into college, when he was a very physically fit young man, they found out he was simply doing push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, all that, but he was doing massive amounts of repetitions of them. But the fact is that you can build some, at least begin, for a person who does nothing, even if they were simply to start doing sit-ups and push-ups and maybe some pull-ups or something like that, would begin to build some muscle mass.
Absolutely. Anything to use those muscles.
So, physically fit, we're trying to develop our cardiovascular system, which is our heart and our lungs, that type of thing, as well as, the second point, is the muscular system as well, which will also kickstart that metabolism, right?
That's correct.
Good. Now, we always hear this. People always say, don't start a physical exercise program unless you visited your doctor. Good advice?
Absolutely, Chris. Anybody, but especially somebody over 30, should visit their doctor and get that okay. But aside from that, anybody can get out and take a short walk to get things going, but you do want to visit your doctor.
Sure. Well, let's move a little bit into nutrition now, and I know that you also do a lot of work with that. What are some basic ideas that we can have to make ourselves more nutritionally fit, more nutritionally healthy, so to speak? What would you say to the average person listening today? They came to you and they say, you know what, I need to really get my nutrition in order. What should I do? What are the basics?
Well, Chris, we've really complicated nutrition, and that's unfortunate because a lot of people are confused now about it, but it really doesn't need to be. First of all, forget all the fad diets, the fad ways of eating. We know from decades of research that the basics that we know are important, and that is that our concentration is on eating lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, lots of whole grains.
When you say whole grains, what do you mean by that?
Whole grains versus processed grains. For example, a processed white bread versus a true whole grain bread.
Okay.
Brown white rice versus white. Whole wheat pasta versus white.
Right.
And that's a very important part. You want to be sure that you're actually getting the whole grain rather than the processed grain.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, the reason fruits, vegetables, and whole grains are important because that's where most of our nutrition is. Vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, etc. Also, that's where all the fiber is.
Right.
Fiber, it's kind of been underrated. There's a lot to fiber. It's very important in health. It's also very important in weight management. People that consume a lot of fiber are much more successful with losing weight. Animal products are fine, but should be eaten in moderation. Our focus should be on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
Animal products you're talking about now, obviously the meats, the red meat, the white meat like chicken or fish, but do you also mean things like cheeses and milks and that type of thing?
That's right. Anything that comes from an animal. So that includes all meats, milk, cheese, fish. Nothing wrong with those. When you do eat those, you want to be sure that you're getting the low-fat versions of them. But they should be in moderation in our diet, and our focus definitely needs to be on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
Okay.
Now, the other thing, Chris, our bodies like getting small amounts of food frequently throughout the day, both for health reasons and for weight management reasons. Our bodies don't like to get a large amount of food at one time. So it's important to eat 3 solid, substantial, healthy meals, including breakfast. You don't want to skip that.
Right.
But it's also important to have healthy snacks throughout the day. Just think of it as fueling your body, fueling your metabolism. So you want to give it small amounts of healthy food frequently throughout the day. You don't want to skip breakfast. And also, a big mistake that many people make is to eat too much of their food too late in the day. So they eat very little during the day, and they tend to eat a large dinner, maybe snacking after that. Our food should be fairly evenly spread out throughout the day, and in fact, our dinner meal should be one of our most moderate meals, and it should be eaten several hours from bedtime, ideally at least 3 hours from bedtime.
I remember when I first started learning a little bit about this, I remember thinking back to some relatives I have that I used to visit in Nebraska during the summers when I was growing up, and I could never figure out why one of my uncles wasn't just grossly overweight, because he ate, a tremendous amount of food, it seemed like. Of course, I was a little kid at the time. But then I started realizing he ate most of it at lunch. Right. He would come home, and of course, back in the Midwest, in Nebraska, where I would go, it was breakfast, dinner, and supper. And they would eat huge lunches. He would come home out of the fields, and of course he was also working very, very hard, and so he was getting his exercise, but he was also eating the very large meal and the portions there at what we would call, or I would call here in my area, my neck of the woods, we'd call it lunch. But again, I also remember that there was lots of vegetables and that type of thing as well. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're talking about having more of a balanced basis of eating, and specifically, it sounds like you've sort of described the what I think it was called the 5 basic food groups, right? But with more of an emphasis on the fruits and the vegetables, the fiber, and that kind of thing. Correct?
That's right, Chris. Let me mention one more thing and I've learned this through years of working with people because I've seen it over and over again. When people start exercising consistently, and I mean just about on a daily basis, a couple things happen. Metabolism changes. They change physically, physiologically, but also their mental outlook on what they're doing changes, Chris. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I see that affect eating. When people become consistent exercisers, it's much easier for them to develop consistent, healthy eating habits. I think part of that is physiological, and I think part of it is mental. They're becoming healthy. They're seeing themselves as healthy people with healthy habits, and it makes it easier to become healthy eaters.
Now, it's interesting because the mind goes both ways. If we get our mind right, then it will help us to exercise and eat right, that type of thing. But what we eat, and this is one of the things that I haven't done a lot of research in, but it's always fascinated me, is what we eat and how it affects our mind. That sugars and things like that have an effect on the physical aspect of the mind, correct? That when you're eating these things, our brains actually they are fueled by the things that we eat and such, correct?
Absolutely, and they can be very much negatively affected by not eating the right foods. Lots of sugar, for example, is one good example.
Yeah. Okay, so any last thoughts as we kind of tie up the nutrition aspect? Again, people should visit their doctors and have some professional, whether it's a doctor or dietitian or whatever, sit down with them, take a look at where they're at, their weight, their body mass, that kind of thing, their lifestyle, and help them design some sort of a program.
Absolutely, Chris. And, I think if you want to start with something, start with taking a little bit of time to plan, because this is often overlooked. Eating healthy doesn't just happen. In fact, what just happens if we don't plan is fairly unhealthy eating.
Right.
Most things that we can get quick, that we're in a jam for time and need to get something quick, it's usually an unhealthy eating situation. So number one, take time to plan it. Like we plan anything else in our life, planning healthy eating takes a little bit of time. Spend some time in the grocery store choosing the right healthy foods. Have those healthy foods available in your house. One more quick tip, again, that I've seen that's been very helpful to people over the years, and that is to have what I call a standby snack.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a healthy food that you always have access to. You keep some in your car, you keep some at work, at school, wherever you are. It's a healthy snack that's always available to you, because one of the jams that people sometimes get into in a fast-paced society is being pressed for time. Maybe you're in your car, driving around, you're at work, whatever, but you haven't eaten in a while, you're getting very hungry. When we're hungry, Chris, the hungrier we are, the less control we have over our food choices,
right,
because the hunger takes over. So
right,
having that healthy standby snack can make a big difference.
Right. Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the soul aspect, the mind, the will, and the emotions. And since we're talking with you and your expertise in the area of physical health, nutrition, that type of thing, let's look at the principles of the mind, will, and emotions. But let's also look at them as they tie into and affect the areas of our physical life. So, and it could be any part of our life, but we'll just use this as the example, because the mind, the will, and the emotions drive so much of who we are and what we do, what we accomplish, what we're afraid of, all both the positive and the negative of what we do or don't do in our lives. How have you seen the mind and the will and the emotions play into people who are trying to get themselves physically fit? And it could be, again, as I mentioned, it could be somebody going to a financial counselor saying, I want to become physically fit, and they would do well to look at all of the underlying aspects of the mind, will, and emotions there as well. But let's just tie it in a little bit with the whole aspect of nutrition. When somebody comes to you and they want to get healthier, what areas do you look for, or what are some tips you can help us strengthen our willpower or develop the emotions that it's going to take to get ourselves fired up to accomplish our goal, which with you would be weight loss or weight management or physical health? What are some thoughts that you have in the area of the mind and how that plays in, and the will and the emotions?
Well, I think it's very important, Chris. A couple things. First of all, I think reading good books, good material on what you're striving for, whether it's healthy eating, exercise, health in general. So
right, it's almost mind nutrition. Put good food into the body for physical nutrition. You put good mental food in for mental nutrition.
Absolutely, and I see two sources for that. One is written information, books or whatever that source may be, and the other is listening to or being around people that are positive and that promote that type of a healthy lifestyle.
Sure.
Now, that might be through seminars like this one. It might be through audio tapes, or it might be as simple as associating with people like that in your life. For example, maybe going to a gym and being around other people that are in that healthy mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about the willpower? People always talk about willpower, and they especially talk about it when it talks about losing weight or whatever. But willpower is what's going to make you save $100 a month for physical fitness. It's what's going to make you be disciplined in all areas of your life. What have you learned about willpower? What are some thoughts or some tips in the area of making sure, as we relate it to getting healthy, we've got this problem that we have to overcome, and that is maybe a will that isn't as strong as it should be. What can we do to strengthen our willpower?
Well, I think two things stand out, Chris. One is what I call a reasons list, and everybody I work with, it's one of the first things I have them do, and that is to take a paper and pencil over a period of a couple of days to write down every reason that particular goal is important to them. For example, let's say their goal is weight loss. Then, over a period of a couple of days, every time you think of a reason that weight loss, getting to your desired weight, is important to you, write it down. Make these very specific. Most people come up with 15, 20, 30 different very specific reasons that reaching that goal is important to them. Now, I believe it's very important to have this on paper, because when the willpower isn't there, we need to be able to go back and look at all those reasons and remind ourselves, yes, this is why this is important to me.
Yeah.
This is why I'm going to get out and take a walk this morning.
Yeah, I remember reading a story about a guy who was 100 pounds, 150 pounds overweight, something like that, and he knew how to lose weight, but he just never had the willpower. And then he found out that his daughter needed a kidney transplant or something like that, and he was a donor, but they said, we can't do it with you because you're too overweight to perform the operation. Well, all of a sudden, he had a reason. And it was within, I don't know, a year or something like that he lost enough weight, 75, 80 pounds, something like that, in order to be allowed to have this surgery done so that he could donate his daughter a kidney. And that's the kind of story that really makes me realize that for so many of us, it's not the technical how-to. We all really know that you eat right and you exercise. But what really stops us most of the time is having those powerful, compelling reasons on why we should eat right and exercise, or why we should save, for our retirement or that type of thing. And so that's got to be a very powerful thing for people to be able to do, is to sit down and have those reasons and to know them.
It is, Chris, and I think having it on paper is very important, because we can think of these from time to time, but being able to go back and see all of them and actually see the list reminds us, and I think it's very powerful. The second thing is making progress.
Right.
What I see is when people start to make a little bit of progress, it increases their willpower.
Yeah.
And increases their resolve. Yes, I'm getting there. I'm seeing a little bit of progress. I can do this. So the more progress you make, what I've seen in people over and over again is that the willpower to do it becomes easier.
Yeah, willpower is almost fueled by its own success.
Yep.
The more confidence they develop, they realize that, hey, I can do this, which makes them have more willpower to do even more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about the emotional aspect? I know people have talked about in the area of weight, people comfort foods and those kinds of things. But it's true really in all areas of our life. I mean, there are people that I've worked with who have emotional issues as it relates to finances. And so, they either are emotionally people who can't save, or they're emotionally people who can do nothing but save. They feel bad within their feelings area if they spend money. So our emotions really govern a lot of what we do. What are some things that you've seen in that area that relates to health, and what are some ideas and some thoughts that you have in that?
Well, some of it, Chris, I think relates back to willpower. That a lot of the emotional difficulties with a healthy lifestyle for whatever purpose are easier to overcome once a person starts seeing success. Number one, I mean, if I had to pick one thing in all of this, Chris, it's that. once somebody starts seeing success and really believes that it can happen for them, it gets easier, whether it's the emotional aspect or whatever. So
it's the whole idea of small wins.
That's right. And
making small wins.
Weight management, is a good example because so many people have tried and not been successful many times.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the people that come to me with weight management problems believe they can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So when that turns around and they start believing they can do it, a lot of the emotional aspects of that are taken.
So why do they believe that they can't do it? What is that? Is it just past failure? They tried and it didn't work, or they've just never seen themselves as anything but overweight, or all of the above?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I mean, a lot of these people, if they've done something 10 times and 10 times they've not been successful at achieving it,
mm-hmm.
their mind says you can't do this.
Right.
And they really believe that. Once that turns around, the battle's just about won.
It becomes self-defeating,
yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit now about the spiritual aspect. And as Jim has laid it out, again, we recognize he described it as layers that you peel back. The physical layer is the outward one that you see. It's your body. It's the physical aspect, and the mind, the will, and the emotions. But then the real core of our lives as human beings is this spiritual aspect, the part of us that transcends this world. And I know from our discussions you and I have had that you have a vibrant spiritual life as well. And we've got people, obviously, from all over the world listening to the conference call. And without going into any of the specifics, what are some general guidelines that you've found? Because I truly believe that the spiritual life that we have drives the mind, the will, and the emotions. The mind, will, and emotions then drive what we're able to do with our physical bodies. I think it starts on the inside and works out. Too often people will say, well, I have a weight problem, I need to work just on the physical, or I have a financial problem, I need to just work on the financial. And I think instead if we would peel back those layers and get to the core issues of our life, the spiritual and then the mind, will, and emotions, that would take care of a lot of the things that take place in our physical world and with our physical body. So maybe you could give us a couple tips that you found in your own life that have allowed you to develop a healthy and a vibrant spiritual life.
Well, I agree, Chris. I mean, I think that's the core of it. A couple things I try to do and try to encourage people to do is, number one, and ideally first thing in the morning before the distractions of the day have started, before your schedule gets busy, I try to spend 10 or 15 minutes. And again, don't make this a long time, just like with the exercise thing.
Right.
Set a short period of time that you can easily achieve, 10 or 15 minutes, for example, just to be quiet. Being quiet and being in a quiet situation is not something that comes easily for us. We live in a busy world where there's always noise and commotion. But spend 10 or 15 minutes just quiet alone with yourself. I spend it praying, reading.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that particular person sees fit, but spend 10 or 15 minutes alone with yourself, quiet.
Mm.
The other thing is, during aerobic exercise, whether I'm walking, jogging, biking, it's usually early in the morning. I'm often by myself. I find that to be a wonderful time to just be alone, to have time to just be quiet and think or pray or whatever the particular situation is.
Yeah.
But I believe starting your day with just some quiet time is important.
I love the old concept that the Quakers used to talk about of becoming centered. They saw that concept of centering down and focusing inward and finding that spot where they're able to pray and be at peace and to hear and to just hear our own thoughts and that type of thing is really truly an amazing thing that you're right, we just don't have much opportunity to do. So what you're saying is just a short period of time. Again, it's more the discipline than anything, where it's focused time, where you can read, and there's lots of, I've just found lots of great little books that you can keep even on your bedside, your nightstand, that you could pick up and read a short little bit that will fuel the spiritual fire a little bit for you that day. Spend a little bit of time being quiet and praying and that type of thing. So you've got your focus time. But then also just throughout the day, spirituality isn't just something that we do in a focused time, but spirituality is really also who we are during the day, how we perceive the world, how we see God's place in it, and our role in it as well. And so just being aware and thoughtful of the fact that all of our lives are ways that we can express our spirituality by the way we treat other people, by the way that we perform our work, and all of those types of things, being spiritually aware throughout the day, right?
Absolutely, Chris. And, two of the things that I try to keep in mind throughout the day that are very easy to forget, again, in a busy, chaotic world. One is gratitude. I try to live a life of gratitude, and I have to constantly remind myself of that, to be grateful. Difficult to do, but I think very helpful if we can continually remind ourselves of that.
Yeah.
And the secondly is to be a loving person, and that is just to treat people kindly. I mean, I think God intended us to love people, and that's not always easy. In fact, it's very difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
But those two things, gratitude and love, I try to consistently remind myself of.
Yeah, that's excellent. Good. Well, we have covered quite a bit here in a short period of time. We've looked at, again, the third pillar of success of Jim's for the One-Year Success program is the pillar of health, and I'm really glad that we're taking a look at it from a broad perspective, that Jim has led us through this idea that we're not just physical health, but it's physical in the area of nutrition and exercise, but it's also emotional, the mind, the will, the emotions in the area of the soul, but then also the spiritual aspects, and understanding that all of these areas are tied together, that they're intricately woven together and affect one another, that your spiritual life affects your physical life affects your emotional life, and all of that type of thing. Very important for us to understand. And if we can make, it sounds like, if I could sum up everything that you've talked about today, Greg, it's even if we make little gains in our lives, those are going to do a couple things. It's going to put us on the road to success, but it's also going to give us a platform for even greater success. And that's exciting to me as well. So with that, we're going to sign off with a conference call. I want to thank everybody who's listening in from all over the world, and want to just encourage you to continue on through the workbooks and through the emails that you're getting, listening to the CDs or watching the DVDs. You're in month 3, and you've got 9 more months to go, and I'm sure if you're like me, you're really enjoying the material and really starting to make some great gains in your life, and that's exciting. I want to thank especially you, Greg, for being here with us, Greg Landry from North Carolina, and a good friend of mine, and I appreciate all of your insights and wisdom into the area of all the different aspects of health. Thanks a lot for being with us, Greg.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, with that, we're going to sign off, and best of luck and success to everybody out there, and go get them. We'll talk to you on the next conference call.